All right, in this video, I'm going to show you guys how I make some of my mold pieces similar to this one here in order to place them into a double-sided flask, for example, and then pour them into silver. So with this, the things that we'll be using, first of all, are epoxy resins. If you get these, they'll come in two parts. The resin that you can see here, and then this one is the hardener. I haven't used these in a while. You can kind of see my hardener's yellowed quite a bit. As long as it doesn't affect the hardening process, we should be just fine, but we'll find out. And then I'm going to be pouring into this mold here. These are kind of some gummy worm style pieces that we'll be making. I'll probably pour 2 or 3, maybe even 4 of them, just in case some of them get bubbles in them, but I'll show you how to get those out. So really they shouldn't get any bubbles. And if you take a look at this one, it's very clear. There's not a single bubble in this whole thing. And if you get them on the outside of the piece, it'll ruin the whole thing. So you really want to make sure that at least on the outer portion of your piece, there's no bubbles that can create holes or anything like that. The other thing I'll be using is just, in this case, a popsicle stick to stir my resin, and also a toothpick. And that is going to be to kind of go in and just make sure that I get any bubbles out again of the outer portion of the piece. This has some kind of little eye pieces in here. And I want to make sure that the resin gets into those pieces as well, so that the whole thing is filled out. And then the other thing I'll be using is a heat gun. You can use like a light torch, or you could use a hair dryer. That might be a little bit much and blowing your resin around more than you want. In this case, I'll be using a heat gun. So I'm going to get some cups. We'll go through the mixing process, and all the way through completion. It takes about 24 hours for the resin to completely harden before they recommend taking it out of the molds. I've found it usually hardens quicker than that, and especially if you do heat it up, which of course we'll be doing. So let me get some things ready and we'll move forward. All right, so we are going to start by pouring equal parts resin and then equal part hardener. So I'm just going to take each one of these. We'll pour them into these cups here. We'll start with the resin. All right, and now the hardener. All right, that looks pretty equal to me. We're going to mix these. I'm just going to pour the hardener into the resin. All right, I'm going to just lightly stir this. You're supposed to lightly stir for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then once we get this stirred, we'll add some heat to it. And the heat will not only help mix it a little bit more, but it will help elevate and take out any bubbles that form in here. You don't want to mix this too rapidly. If you mix it too fast or too rapidly, it's just going to cause more bubbles to form. And then it just takes more time to get those bubbles out. All right, so I just applied about 30 seconds of heat with the heat gun to this while it was off camera. As you can see, it warped the plastic cup a little bit, which is fine. I'm going to continue to stir this up a little bit while applying some heat with the heat gun. But the consistency of this has really gotten a lot better. There's no more swirls or separation of the two separate resins. The bubbles have dissipated a little bit more. Any of the larger bubbles are mostly out of this, but I think another 30 seconds and this will be good to go. All right, I think this is getting pretty well mixed at this point. You can see there's some of those little bubbles in there. I will go ahead and apply a little bit more heat, but once we pour this into the molds, we'll apply heat again to the resin while it's in the mold, and that'll help again get any of those little bubbles out of there. But the biggest thing is making sure that you don't have any larger size bubbles for the most part. These tiny ones, I don't want them to be on the edges of my mold piece. But again, if they are in the center and there's some in there, that's fine. We really just want to make sure they're not around the edges. And if it's anything like I've done in the past, ultimately it should be virtually bubble free when you're done. But I think this is mixed well enough. I'm going to go ahead and get the mold piece out and ready, and we'll go ahead and pour this into our mold. All right, so in just the 20 or 30 seconds or so it took me to grab that mold piece, and I had just set this resin down, you can see that it is now bubble free. So it's extremely clear. I think we are ready to go ahead and pour this into the mold. So I am going to carefully pour this into these pieces here. I think we'll end up having enough to probably pour 6 to 8 or so of these. But let me move this a little to the side. I will go ahead and carefully start pouring into the mold here, and we'll see how many pieces we get out of this. Okay, we'll see if I can do this without making too much of a mess. You really want to be careful in pouring these. If you over pour them, you are going to get spillover, and you're just going to have to spend more time cleaning up your piece by trimming off or filing off any of the excess pour. If you under pour them, you are going to either not get the whole piece filled, or you can end up with like a concave bottom side to the piece. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll keep pouring these and see how many we get. I think I forgot to mention before, but this is just a silicone mold. This one happens to be made for candy gummy worms. They also make these for ice cubes and that sort of thing. I happen to have gotten this one on Amazon. Okay, so as you can see, I was actually able to pour all, what is this, I guess, all 12 of these. As you can see, they are looking pretty good. I didn't get too many over pours or anything like that, so overall they're looking pretty clean. Also, there doesn't really appear to be any bubbles in these from our mixing process before, so I think it's looking pretty good. I'm going to show you a little close up here. You can see there's no bubbles in there. They look nice and clear. So I'm going to put this into a safe space. We'll let these harden. Should take somewhere probably closer to 6 to 8 hours or so, but we'll probably just let it sit overnight, and we'll end up with about 24 hours of hardening. All right, so it has been 24 hours since I poured these. It looks like they have completely hardened at this point. The smaller these pieces are, they're going to harden or cure pretty quickly. Like I said before, oftentimes even within 8 hours or so. I checked them this morning and they are ready. So, and they look great. I don't see any bubbles at all in any of these. I didn't need to apply that second heat gun. I did forget to go in with the toothpick and make sure that that epoxy was filling these eyes. It looks like there's kind of bubbles in those eyes, so we'll pull a couple of these out and see if the eyes did fill. Hopefully they did. But let's go ahead and let's just get one of these out of here, and we'll take a look. And yes, it did thankfully fill those eyes, as you can see there, if I can get this to focus properly. But yes, these look great. So what I'm going to do is, if anything, I'll need to file these down a little bit if there's any extra epoxy. Like you can kind of see right here, it looks like I'm having some focus issues, but it's got a little extra epoxy on the side there. So we'll have to file that off, for example. And I'll probably just want, 2 of these that are nice and clean, so that if I want to, I can pour multiple pieces at the same time. But you can see that with my mixture, it didn't take very much, and these are really small. So where I was expecting to just make enough epoxy to pour 4 or so of these, I was able to do You know, it looks like, what is that, 12 of them. So in any case, I'm going to get a couple of these cleaned up so they don't have any extra epoxy on them. And we'll go ahead and pour a couple of these into some silver and show you the finished product. All right, so here's a better look at the final piece. I actually had 5 or 6 of them that came out really well, that didn't really require any cleaning up or anything like that. I had a couple that were a little under poured, and when that happened, like I mentioned before, you can get a little bit of a kind of a concave surface on the bottom here. So I threw those to the side, but these came out looking really good. There were no bubbles on the outer surface, or really any bubbles at all. So we'll go ahead and use these and pour some silver. All right, so as you can see, we got our worms in our double-sided flask mold here. So I am going to go ahead and get this finished up, and we'll start some pouring. All right, so as you can see, I got these cleaned up. They came out really well. I'm very pleased with the way that the eyes turned out. They feel really nice when you're holding them in your hand. The ridges are cool. As you can see, I haven't stamped these yet, but I threw them on the scale and they came in just under 1 ounce at about 29 grams or so. Kind of similar to these 1 ounce pencils that I make. They feel a little heavier than they are when you're holding them. This was actually a recommendation or suggestion by somebody in one of my groups. Shout out to Stefan. But in any case, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video on how to make these epoxy molds. Thanks for watching.